If you blinked, you might have missed it, because the NFL just dropped a boatload of news. And whether you realize it or not, it directly impacts your San Francisco 49ers. The franchise tag deadline passed, and suddenly, a wave of serious talent is about to hit the open market. That changes everything. Not just for rebuilding teams, not just for contenders, but especially for a team like the 49ers that's still right in the middle of a Super Bowl window. Free agency is here before it even feels like the season ended. The combine is in the rear view. The draft is approaching fast, and this is the time when smart front offices separate themselves. So the big question for you is simple. Do you want the 49ers to be aggressive spenders in free agency, or do you trust them to build through the draft? I want to know where you stand, because this year feels different. Several big-name players were not tagged, which means they're about to test the market. That includes Kenneth Walker and Travis Etienne, explosive running backs who would instantly upgrade a lot of teams. But let's be real with each other for a second. Does it make sense for the 49ers to throw serious money at a running back when Christian McCaffrey is already on the roster? Probably not. As fun as it is to imagine another dynamic weapon, that's not where this team's biggest need is. Still, Walker coming off a 1,000-yard season, showing burst, power, and playoff production, that's going to drive his price up. And Etienne, when healthy, is one of the most dynamic dual-threat backs in football. But here's the key. The 49ers don't need luxury pieces. They need difference makers in specific areas that held them back at critical moments. That's why this wave of free agents matters so much. Because while some teams are looking for star power, the Niners are looking for finishing pieces. The type of player who fixes what went wrong against elite competition. The type of player who wins against press man, coverage. The type of pass rusher who closes games when the fourth quarter gets tight. And trust me, we're about to talk about a wide receiver who could completely change the dynamic of this offense, and a defensive end who, opposite Nick Bosa, would have you grabbing the popcorn immediately. Before we get there, though, quick yes or no. Should the 49ers ever pay top-of-the-market money for a running back? Drop a simple yes or no. I'm curious how aggressive you want this front office to be. Because the next names we're about to discuss, those are players who could actually shift the balance of power in the NFC. And one of them might be the exact explosive weapon this offense has been missing. Now let's talk about the name that should have every single member of the faithful leaning forward in their seat right now. Alec Pierce. I'm going to say it straight up to you. This is the kind of move that could quietly change everything for this offense. Not flashy in the way a massive, blockbuster trade would be, not the type of signing that breaks the internet, but the type that wins you playoff games in January. Pierce has led the league in yards per catch over the last 2 seasons. Let that sink in for a second. Over 21 yards per reception. That's not just good, that's rare. And historically rare at that. The only other player to average 20-plus yards per catch multiple times in a career? DeSean Jackson. That's elite company when we're talking about pure field-stretching ability. But here's what makes this even more interesting for the 49ers. You remember the struggles against press-man coverage on the biggest stage? You remember what happens when defenses load the box, get physical at the line, and force timing routes off schedule. Pierce thrives against that. A 71% success rate versus man coverage. Over 76% against press. That is exactly the type of receiver who forces defensive coordinators to back up safeties and respect the deep ball. Now, imagine him in Kyle Shanahan's system. You already have route technicians. You already have yards after catch monsters. What you don't consistently have is a pure vertical threat who can win over the top track the football, and flip the field in one play. Pierce does that. He's young, he's athletic, he's physical, and here's something that doesn't get talked about enough. He's reliable. Only 4 drops over the last 2 seasons. That matters. And I want you to picture this for a second. Brock, Purdy, clean pocket. Play action fake. Safeties creeping down because they have to respect the run. And Pierce streaking down the sideline. That's explosive football. That's how you punish aggressive defenses. So let me ask you this. Would you rather the 49ers sign Alec Pierce in free agency or draft a receiver and hope he develops? Drop your answer in the comments and be real about it, because this front office has to decide whether they want proven production or potential. Now, real quick, before we continue, if you're part of the faithful and you believe this team is one piece away, help us grow this community. We're pushing toward 2,000 subscribers, and your subscription genuinely matters. Hit that button, turn on notifications, and if you really want to fuel the quest for the next Super Bowl trophy, use the Super Thanks or the Hype feature below. That's not a donation. That's you investing in better coverage, better production, and a stronger 49ers family. Every bit of support helps us level this up for you. All right, back to business. The reason I love the idea of Pierce in San Francisco isn't just about numbers. It's about fit. Shanahan's offense thrives when defenses are stressed horizontally and vertically. Pierce forces vertical stress. And when you combine that with motion, misdirection, and layered route concepts, you start creating hesitation in secondaries. And hesitation is how you win in the playoffs. Now, here's the catch. He's not going to be cheap. Teams value explosive plays more than ever. And when a player consistently averages over 20 yards per catch, that's going to get attention. So the next question becomes financial discipline. What's the number where you're comfortable? What's too much? Because while Pierce might be the offensive splash, there are defensive names out there that could shift the identity of this team in a different way. And speaking of shifting identity, let's talk about what adding another elite pass rusher next to Nick Bosa could do to this defense. Now, let's flip to the other side of the ball, because if Alec Pierce is the splash on offense, the defensive names hitting the market might be even more important to this team's Super Bowl chances. Start with Odafe Oweh. He's one of those players who came into the league with traits that made scouts drool: length, burst, power. The kind of athletic profile you can't teach. Early in his career, the production didn't always match the tools. But lately, you're starting to see it click. 7.5 sacks in a 12-game stretch after the trade. Double-digit sack production over the last 2 seasons. Pressure numbers climbing. Quarterback hits stacking up. That's growth. That's development. That's a player entering his prime. Now imagine Oweh lining up opposite Nick Bosa. You'd finally force offenses to pick their poison. Slide protection to Bosa? Oweh gets one-on-one. Chip Oweh? Bosa eats. That's how dominant defensive lines are built. And what I like about Oweh specifically for this scheme is versatility. He can rush outside. He can kick inside on passing downs. That flexibility is huge when you're trying to create mismatches late in games. The 49ers' defensive identity has always been built around pressure without blitzing. Oweh helps restore that formula. But then there's Trey Hendrickson. This is where things get really interesting. Yes, he's older. Yes, he's coming off injury. But before that, back-to-back 17.5 sack seasons. No one in football had more sacks over that span. Not even Myles Garrett. That's elite production. And here's why the fit makes sense. Because of his age and the recent injury, You might not have to give him a massive 5-year commitment. This could be a short-term, high-impact move, a 2-year window play, and when you're in a championship window, those are the kinds of swings you take. Hendrickson is a tone setter, team captain, high motor, plays through contact, empties the tank, and you know exactly what you're getting when he's healthy. Relentless edge pressure. So let me throw this at you. If you could sign only one to line up opposite Bosa, Owe, or Hendrickson, who are you choosing? Type the name in the comments. I want to see where the faithful leans on this, because here's the reality. You don't win championships in today's NFL without being able to affect the quarterback in the fourth quarter. And while the 49ers have star power, adding another consistent closer could be the difference between falling short and finally lifting that Lombardi. Now, all of that is exciting. Explosive receivers, elite edge rushers, splash signings. But what if the most important move isn't flashy at all? What if it's the one position that quietly determines whether your offense functions at an elite level every single snap? Because there's a center on the market who might reset the entire position financially. And the question is whether San Francisco should be bold enough to chase him. And now we get to the move that might not light up social media, might not trend nationally, but could be the most important decision this front office makes. Tyler Linderbaum. If you've watched this team closely, you know the center position has been solid, serviceable, league average. But when you're chasing a Super Bowl, average doesn't always cut it. Linderbaum is not average. He's one of the best centers in football. Physical at the point of attack, quick off the snap, elite when climbing to the second level. And in a zone-heavy run scheme like Kyle Shanahan's, that mobility matters more than people realize. He's comfortable pulling. He's comfortable in space. He plays with a mean streak. And that Iowa background shows up every single snap. Here's the catch, though. He might reset the market. There's real buzz that he could push toward $25 million per year. That's serious money at center. That's the kind of contract that forces you to make tough decisions elsewhere on the roster. So the question becomes philosophical. Do you invest heavily in the interior offensive line to protect Brock Purdy long-term and dominate in the run game? Or do you spread those dollars across multiple positions and hope depth carries you? Because make no mistake, upgrading at center has ripple effects. Cleaner pockets, better communication against complex fronts, more consistency in short yardage situations. And in playoff football, interior pressure is what collapses offenses. If you add a Pierce on the outside, an Owe or Hendrickson on defense, and then solidify the spine of your offensive line with Linderbaum, that's not tweaking the roster. That's reloading for another run. But it requires aggression. It requires conviction. So here's the final question for you. Would you rather see one massive signing like Linderbaum or 3 smart, balanced moves across the roster? Drop your answer in the comments, because this front office has real decisions to make. And as we head into free agency coverage, breaking signings, instant reactions, and draft buildup, this is where this channel thrives. If you're part of the faithful and you haven't subscribed yet, now is the time. We're pushing toward 2,000 subscribers, and every single one of you helps build this community stronger. Turn on notifications so you don't miss a single move. When news drops, we're breaking it down immediately. The next few weeks could define the 49ers season before a single snap is played.